What if the person you thought was crazy, the one dismissed by all those around him, turned out to be the one who changed everything? History is full of moments where unconventional actions, those considered impossible, reckless, or even insane, ended up reshaping the future. But how far are we willing to go before we start questioning the status quo? What if the one who dares to break the rules is actually the one who saves the day? In the middle of one of the most crucial battles of the war, a young pilot stood out against all logic, against all expectations. When others said he was crazy, he didn't just prove them wrong. He redefined what it meant to be a hero, the kind of hero that history never saw coming. This is the story of a man who, with nothing but raw courage, skill, and a willingness to defy convention, altered the course of the war. This young pilot, barely out of training, was about to face his first real test. A test not only of his flying skills, but of his very judgment. The military command, composed of seasoned veterans, thought he was out of his depth. But in the chaos of battle, where experience often meets its limits, it's the daring, the untested minds, who sometimes spark the change the world needs. So, how did a crazy decision end up being the turning point of a battle that seemed destined to be lost? To understand that, we have to go back to the day the impossible became possible. If you've made it this far, you're probably starting to realize that sometimes it's the most unexpected people and actions that can change everything. This story is proof of how an individual's bravery, even when others doubted him, can make a monumental difference in history. But here's the real question. How often do we miss out on opportunities because we listen to conventional wisdom or are too afraid to take risks? Take a moment to reflect on what we've just shared. Have you ever doubted someone only to find out they were right all along? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Share your experiences or maybe even the story of someone who defied expectations and succeeded. We want to hear from you. If this story has sparked your curiosity, don't forget to hit that like button. It helps us bring more untold stories like this one to the surface. Also, subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss another moment of history revealed in a whole new light. Now, let's dive deeper into the story of this young pilot and how he defied the odds in a way that changed the entire battle. Ready for the next chapter? Let's go. On that fateful day, the young pilot wasn't just fighting against enemy forces. He was battling skepticism from every direction. His peers, the seasoned veterans, called him crazy. They said he had no idea what he was doing. After all, he was just a young officer, recently out of flight school, with little experience in actual combat. The military establishment had their own rules, their own protocols, their own understanding of how things should be done. But sometimes the most unexpected heroes come from places no one expects. This young pilot didn't follow the usual playbook. He didn't play it safe. While everyone else was calculating risks, he threw caution to the wind. The military's doctrine said, "Stay in formation. Follow orders. Do not stray from the plan." But he did the opposite. He went off script, choosing a path no one else would dare. It all started when he was assigned to a critical mission, one that could shift the entire course of the battle. As his squadron prepared for the attack, the veteran officers warned him to follow procedure, to wait for the right moment to strike. But the young pilot saw something they didn't. The enemy was vulnerable, but only if he acted quickly. The right time, he realized, wasn't in the plan, it was now. He took off, his heart racing, but his mind focused. With each passing second, the stakes grew higher, and with them, the pressure. He knew that a single wrong move could end his life, and likely the mission. But instead of hesitating, He pushed forward. As he soared through the sky, the other pilots in his squadron followed him, unsure but compelled by the raw energy of his decision. And then it happened, the moment that would go down in history. The young pilot pulled off a maneuver no one had ever attempted in combat before. Instead of waiting for the enemy to engage him, he charged right at them. Defying the conventional strategy, he flew straight into the heart of the storm, pushing his aircraft to its limits. The veterans had called him crazy, but now they were watching in disbelief as he began to systematically take down the enemy one by one. The world watched as the young pilot's bold decision not only succeeded but completely changed the course of the battle. In a matter of minutes, the impossible became possible. The other pilots followed suit, and the momentum shifted in favor of the squadron. They had defied the odds. What seemed like madness turned into brilliance. But how did this young pilot, who had no right to succeed, outsmart and outmaneuver the seasoned adversaries? How did he know, against all odds, that this gamble would pay off? What set this young pilot apart wasn't just his flying skills, it was his ability to think differently, to see a problem and then, against all advice, find a solution where others only saw obstacles. While the more experienced pilots hesitated, stuck in their old ways of thinking, he saw an opening. It was a moment of sheer clarity in the chaos of battle. As he dove into enemy territory, his maneuver wasn't just bold, it was revolutionary. The pilot knew that sticking to the standard protocol would likely result in a lost opportunity, and with it, a loss for his entire squadron. But he had one thing the veterans didn't: an unshakable belief in the power of action over inaction. His tactic: instead of waiting for the enemy to make their move, he took the initiative. He broke from the rigid formations, carving out his own path in the sky, while his squadron followed closely behind. This was a gamble, one that could have gone terribly wrong. But the key here was not just the maneuver itself, it was the confidence and the timing. The pilot had waited for the precise moment when the enemy's guard was down, when they were least expecting it. As he advanced, the enemy forces, who had been expecting a traditional engagement, found themselves completely out of sync with the pilot's strategy. His unpredictability forced them into disarray. What followed was nothing short of extraordinary. The young pilot, against all odds, executed each move with precision, taking out multiple enemy fighters in a matter of minutes. The veterans, who had ridiculed him only moments before, were now watching in stunned silence as he single-handedly changed the course of the battle. It wasn't just his tactics that amazed them, it was the fact that he had dared to challenge everything they thought they knew about combat. And the most surprising part: the more the young pilot flew, the more he realized that this unconventional approach, this breaking of the rules, was actually more effective than the established tactics. As the minutes passed, it became clear. His crazy method was actually a stroke of genius. But how did he know? How could he have been so sure that this risk, this deviation from the expected, would succeed? In the heat of battle, with everything on the line, how did this young pilot know that his gamble would pay off? As the young pilot's bold tactics began to unfold, the atmosphere around him shifted. The atmosphere in the air was no longer just one of combat. It became one of disbelief and awe. What was initially seen as reckless behavior now looked like the perfect execution of a battle strategy. The crazy pilot wasn't just surviving the battle, he was dominating it. What happened next was nothing short of a revolution in military tactics. His success was so overwhelming that it quickly became clear that his approach could change the course of the entire engagement. The veteran pilots, once skeptical and critical, started to see the method in his madness. In fact, they began to adopt his unconventional tactics. Realizing that their old way of thinking had become outdated, inefficient, in the face of a new kind of warfare, this young pilot's breakthrough wasn't just about flying. It was about timing, about exploiting weaknesses in the enemy's strategy, and most importantly, about doing the unexpected. His unpredictability had thrown the enemy into chaos, creating a situation where the opposing forces couldn't adapt fast enough to his new way of fighting. His boldness had shaken up the battlefield, forcing the enemy to reconsider their strategies in real time. The shift in momentum was palpable. His squadron, once hesitant, now had new hope. The rest of the pilots watching him defy the odds and take charge couldn't help but follow his lead. One by one, they began to implement the young pilot's tactics, and the results were undeniable. The enemy forces were crumbling, their strategies unraveling with every move the young pilot made. And then came the ultimate moment, a move that seemed impossible. Even suicidal became the defining victory of the battle. The young pilot, through sheer will, determination, and an unrelenting belief in his own approach, managed to secure the most crucial win of the campaign. He didn't just change the course of the battle, he reshaped how everyone saw war tactics. What had started as a joke among his peers, a dismissal of his abilities and ideas, had now become the turning point in a battle that seemed lost. The same people who once mocked him for being crazy were now looking to him as the one who had saved the day. The lesson here is clear. Sometimes the ones who are dismissed as crazy are the ones who change everything. Sometimes, to break through, you have to break the rules. This young pilot had done just that. He didn't just fight against the enemy, he fought against the expectations placed upon him, proving that sometimes you have to trust your instincts, even when everyone else doubts you. As the dust settled and the battle drew to a close, the once dismissed young pilot found himself at the center of a new reality. The results spoke for themselves. The battle, which had seemed destined for failure, had turned into a decisive victory. All thanks to the crazy pilot who had dared to challenge conventional wisdom. The veterans, who had initially ridiculed his methods, were now left speechless. They had witnessed firsthand how a single pilot's bravery and innovative thinking had completely changed the outcome of the battle. The young pilot had proved them wrong, not with words, but with action. He had transformed what they thought was a losing situation into an overwhelming success. As word of his achievement spread, so did the recognition. What was once considered a reckless gamble was now hailed as a stroke of genius. The military command, who had initially overlooked the young pilot's potential, could no longer deny the impact of his actions. The daring tactics he employed were no longer viewed as insane. They were seen as a revolutionary approach to modern warfare. But the young pilot didn't bask in the glory. He wasn't interested in accolades or recognition. For him, the real victory was in the lives saved, the battle won, and the trust he had earned from his squadron. He had proven that sometimes success comes not from following the rules, but from breaking them. However, his journey didn't end there. The young pilot's success became a case study for military strategists and leaders. His ability to think on his feet, to defy conventional thinking and act boldly, was studied and analyzed in military schools. He became an example of how, in war, the unexpected could often become the most effective strategy. And yet, despite his newfound fame, the young pilot remained humble. He never lost sight of the fact that his actions were not about personal glory, but about doing what was necessary to win. His focus remained on the mission, on the men he flew with, and on the countless others whose lives had been affected by the decisions made that day. The legacy of that young pilot was not only in the victory he achieved, but in the lessons he imparted. That sometimes thinking outside the box, questioning the established norms, and trusting your instincts can lead to the most remarkable outcomes. The young pilot's actions left a profound mark, not only on the battle at hand, but also on military tactics and warfare as a whole. The victory that came from his audacity and unconventional thinking was studied, analyzed, and ultimately adopted by others who had been skeptical of his methods. The military had to rethink its approach, recognizing that perhaps the rigid, conventional doctrines of warfare were no longer as effective in an evolving battlefield. Soon after the battle, military leaders began to look at his tactics not as a fluke, but as a new approach that could be applied in future conflicts. His ability to take charge when it seemed impossible and his readiness to defy authority became a symbol of the kind of leadership needed in uncertain times. The young pilot's success wasn't just about flying. It was about understanding the terrain, reading the enemy's movements, and adapting on the fly, something that old-school strategies failed to provide. His battle had been a microcosm of a larger shift in military strategy. The concept of rigid, predetermined plans started to fade as the realization set in flexibility. Creativity and initiative in the heat of battle could make all the difference. The young pilot had proved that a moment of inspired improvisation could change the course of history. But it wasn't just the military world that was influenced by his daring. His story resonated beyond the battlefield, inspiring people in all walks of life to take chances, to trust their instincts, and to step outside the boundaries that were often imposed on them by others. The message was clear. Sometimes the crazy ideas are the ones that change everything. The young pilot's legacy became something more than just a military achievement. He had shown that success often comes from those who are willing to see the world differently. His bravery had inspired a generation to push past the limits of conventional thought, to take risks that others might deem impossible, and to fight for what seemed unachievable. The world would never forget how a single pilot, once written off as crazy, had changed the course of history with one audacious move. While the young pilot's bravery became the stuff of legends, there were costs that went unnoticed amidst the accolades. One is not just about the victories and triumphs. It is also about the human toll, the sacrifices made by those who serve, and the lives that are forever changed in the wake of battle. The pilot's journey, while inspiring, was also a reminder of the toll that comes with defying the odds. For every heroic decision made on the battlefield, there are consequences that ripple through the lives of the men and women involved. The young pilot's actions had certainly turned the tide of battle, but for him it also meant a life spent in constant danger, in moments of uncertainty, and with the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. He wasn't just fighting for victory. He was fighting to protect the lives of his comrades, to ensure that their sacrifice was not in vain. In the aftermath of the battle, as the young pilot received recognition for his bravery, he couldn't help but think about the lives lost. He thought of the men who had fallen alongside him, the pilots who didn't make it back, the families who would never see their loved ones again. His victory, while significant, came with a sense of grief, a reminder that war is ultimately about lives taken and lives saved. But this internal conflict didn't make him regret his decision. On the contrary, it reinforced his belief that the right decision, even if it seems insane at the time, can sometimes be the only way forward. His victory wasn't just for him, it was for all those who couldn't fight for themselves, for those who depended on the success of the mission. The young pilot's legacy is a complex one. It's easy to focus on the heroism and the glory of his victory. But his story also serves as a somber reflection on the realities of war. It is a reminder that even the most celebrated victories come with sacrifices, and that true bravery often involves carrying the weight of those sacrifices. The young pilot's victory wasn't just a personal triumph, it became a turning point for his entire squadron. Before that day, he had been just another new face among experienced soldiers, unproven in combat and dismissed by many as just another rookie with dreams of grandeur. But after his unexpected success, he became something more, a symbol of how, in times of war, leadership can come from the most unlikely sources. What made his success even more powerful was how it inspired those around him. His fellow pilots, who had initially questioned his methods, were now rallying behind him. The veteran officers, who had once dismissed him as naive or reckless, now sought his guidance. His actions showed them that courage isn't just about following orders, it's about making decisions based on what is right for the mission, even if it means going against the grain. The young pilot's leadership wasn't just about his flying skills. It was about his ability to inspire trust in others, to show that sometimes the right decision isn't the one that's popular or safe, but the one that challenges the norm. He had demonstrated that true leaders aren't born out of tradition or seniority. They rise to the occasion when the need is greatest. But his impact wasn't limited to his squadron alone. His story became a beacon of hope for others who were struggling with self-doubt or fear. His ability to turn a situation that seemed impossible into a victory showed everyone that they had more control over their fate than they realized. The young pilot wasn't just changing the course of battles. He was changing the way people viewed leadership and courage. By the time the war ended, he had transformed from an unknown rookie to one of the most respected figures in his unit, and his influence would last far beyond the battlefield. His story would go on to inspire not only future generations of pilots, but leaders across all walks of life. In the years that followed the young pilot's victory, his actions began to be studied, analyzed, and incorporated into military doctrine. What had initially been dismissed as a reckless gamble was now seen as a masterstroke in battlefield strategy. The military leaders who had once considered him a crazy pilot began to recognize the brilliance of his approach, and his tactics were soon adopted as part of standard training for future pilots. The young pilot's success wasn't just about breaking through enemy lines. It was about breaking through the walls of tradition that had held back military innovation. His ability to think outside the box, to act swiftly and decisively in the face of uncertainty, became a model for how future leaders should approach battle. The rigid doctrines of the past, which often led to predictable and easily exploited patterns, were now being questioned in favor of more fluid, adaptable tactics. The pilot's legacy continued to grow as military academies across the world began to teach his methods. His actions proved that sometimes the key to success in war wasn't following the prescribed rules, but challenging them, being bold enough to make decisions that might seem insane in the moment, but that ultimately led to victory. It wasn't just the military that learned from his legacy. The world of business, leadership, and innovation also took notes. His ability to navigate uncertainty, trust his instincts, and defy conventional wisdom became a model for leaders in every field. The young pilot's story went beyond the realm of combat. It became a lesson in how to face adversity, embrace risk, and change the course of history. As the years passed, the young pilot's story became legend, not only for the victory he had achieved, but for the principles he embodied. His journey from crazy to celebrated hero wasn't just about a single battle or a specific tactic. It was about the mindset that guided him. His place in history was secured, not just by the mission he completed, but by the way he changed the way people thought about leadership, courage, and the true meaning of victory. The pilot's legacy was not one of a single act of bravery, but rather the lasting impact of his approach. He taught future generations of soldiers and leaders that success doesn't always come from following the rules. It often comes from questioning them, from thinking critically and acting decisively in moments when everyone else is stuck in hesitation. In a world where conformity was often the safest route, the young pilot showed that sometimes the most dangerous path can be the one that leads to the greatest rewards. As the world moved on from the war, his name remained etched in the annals of military history. But more than just his name, it was his philosophy that resonated. His bravery had shown that no matter the odds, no matter how impossible the task seemed, it was always possible to change the outcome with bold, decisive action. And so, the young pilot's story lives on, a testament to the power of defying the expectations placed upon you, to the strength found in taking risks, and to the incredible potential of a single person to change the course of history. His story continues to inspire leaders and heroes, both on and off the battlefield, to rise above the ordinary and strive for greatness. If you made it to the end of this incredible journey, we want to hear from you. What did you think of the young pilot's story? What would you have done in his position? Drop a comment below and let us know your thoughts. We love hearing from our community and diving into the discussions that matter most. If this story inspired you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. You've been part of something extraordinary today, and we want to share even more amazing stories with you. Also, make sure to leave a comment telling us where you're watching from and share this video with someone who might need a little inspiration. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for the next exciting adventure.